afternoon. So we're here to speak about mobile in Latin America, and I have a fantastic trio of panelists with me today that I'd like to introduce to you all. Gus Diamant, the Managing Director of Latin America for Spotify, Noah Weiss, SVP of Product Management at Foursquare, and Adam Geiger, who manages app engagement for TAP e-commerce at Twitter. And I think, it's pretty obvious today. We've seen a lot of mobile stories here at Internet Week. Mobile doesn't need a lot of explanation for why we're up here on this stage, but Latin America may. And so I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about why Latin America. Latin America today is a region, one of the fastest growing regions in the world when it comes to internet penetration. It is one of the regions in the world with highest mobile penetration, actually, much more so than the United States. When it comes to the digital consumer in social, 5 of 10 countries in the world with the highest social engagement are from Latin America. And so within this region, we have this digital consumer that is very highly engaged, very highly motivated, cross-platform and multi-channel. And that's where IMS comes in, because I think that Twitter, Spotify, and Foursquare here need no introduction. But IMS Internet Media Services is the company that I'm a CMO of. We are in 10 countries within Latin America, and we are the exclusive go-to-market partner when platforms such as Spotify, Foursquare, and Twitter are looking to launch their commercial activities in Latin America. And so we help them engage with brands, with advertisers, understand the nuances within the market, and help them reach that end client throughout all of the various markets in Latin America. So today what's exciting is that I was looking at this panel, and we have represented here 3 of what are perhaps the most significant trends today in mobile, right? We have e-commerce, TAP for Twitter. We have geolocation with Foursquare. We have streaming content with Spotify. And so as we walk through Latin America and the nuances of Latin America, I'll actually be asking you as well specifics around those 3 trends. And so Noah, I'd like to start with you.
Sure.
Geolocation, Foursquare, fantastic way to understand consumers and what their interests are.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in Latin America. What are Latin Americans interested in? Is there a difference between Latin Americans and the rest of the world, or are we facing just a globalized consumer today?
Yeah, it's interesting. So Latin America is a place that kind of has evolved organically for us. Foursquare, from the very beginning, its roots was people wanted to be able to share where they are, and they created places when those places weren't there. So we saw these pockets of usage kind of emerge very organically. For us, Latin America today is about 20% of our total user base, which is quite large. Brazil, Mexico, Chile are some of our biggest markets down there. Things that we see there that are kind of different than here in the US is the amount that people share on a per user basis is much higher. I think there's almost a little bit of a kind of brush back to social a little bit in America, where people are like, I don't want to be humble bragging all the time. I don't want to be sharing where I am. I don't want to be sharing what I'm up to. In these countries, we see check-ins per day, photos per day. All those things are much higher on a per user basis. And then we see Foursquare is a product where, as a search product, it's all about being personalized to your interests. And we see people have very different interests, obviously, in Latin America than here in the US. In Brazil, we were just looking up this at the office, like churrascarias are the #1 interest in Brazil, which makes a lot more sense. I think pizza and burgers are both top of mind in both Brazil and Mexico. So we see kind of very kind of local slants in terms of what types of places people are searching for as well.
Great. And so when people are searching, you notice some trends that come to mind. Do you see other trends that maybe go beyond the gourmet, right? Restaurants we always think of as very Foursquare, very apt to Foursquare.
The other big thing we see, even more so than here in the US, is just the amount of shopping and mall time people spend. Here in New York, malls are kind of a little bit of a dirty word, right? No one would say, yeah, I'm going to the mall this weekend. What a great time that would be. I was in Sao Paulo a couple of years ago, and I remember I'd go to these malls and you'd see hundreds of people checked in. This was back in 2011, and that's only continued to kind of evolve as, I think, just the way that people socially kind of interact at malls is very different than here in the US. So we see just a tremendous amount of shopping activity. I'm sure obviously on the e-commerce side you'll have a lot to share there, but even just offline commerce. And Foursquare and Swarm are both really good at being able to help you figure out, like, if you're at the J. Crew in the mall or you're at kind of the grocery store, and be able to share that or be able to search for that really easily.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
And Gus, a question for you. Streaming content, I was reading the other day, in Latin America is set to triple over the next 3 years. So a lot of consumer engagement with streaming. Obviously, this week, some big news from Spotify about some diversification that we're going to be seeing to music, podcast, video incorporation. What are you seeing at Spotify in terms of user engagement? Because Spotify just launched, right, a few years ago into Latin America, entered Latin America. Yeah. It is, as far as I can tell, it's the #1, right, streaming music service. It has a big hold on the Latin American market. Any differences you see in the way that people engage with music?
Yes, I think that there is one thing that I would like to start. There's not such a thing like Latin America. I mean, to be honest, you know, being the managing director for Latin America at Spotify, and you guys know, I mean, we are activating the brand from a marketing perspective, advertising sales, subscription adoption and growth. Each market has its own specificity, and even the Spanish that they talk is different. So when we make like mistakes using like the Spanish from Colombia and Peru, I mean, people do realize that, and we get a lot of bad comments on social networking. So that's the first thing. But if we look overall Latin America, one of the things that we do realize when it comes to music engagement, the audience that is engaging with music, with digital music, is much younger than the audience that is engaging with music already like in mainland Europe or even in the United States. 75% of our base is in between 13 years old and 34 years old. Also, there is a little bit more male using it. In Mexico, 66% of our population on Spotify is represented by male. In Argentina, it's more like 50-50. So there is this variance, but it's a little bit more male at this beginning, if I can call this way, because it's only 2 years that we have been on the road there. I also would say that although, I don't know how much of you guys know, but legal download is really going down dramatically. I mean, it's consumers are not buying for tracks anymore. In Latin America, it is still the #1 form of consumption. It is also decreasing, but because streaming is such like a new thing into the market in comparison to other markets, so I can tell that downloads is still #1, streaming is the #2 form of way of consuming musical content. You mentioned mobile, right? And you said that when it comes to internet penetration, Latin America really kind of has like an important role. Argentina, when it comes to internet penetration, if I'm not mistaken, is #12. But if you look only to mobile and hours spent on mobile, is #1. So this is how mobile, a lot of the experiences that people are having on the internet in Latin America, they tend to happen firstly in a smartphone. People who's skipping even having tablets or even like a desktop or a laptop computer. And payments. I think payments is something that maybe is a little bit too much detailed, but we have like a big percentage of the population that do not have bank accounts. And even if they do have bank accounts, they're still very much afraid of putting the credit card information into like a web service. So we need to take this into account when developing offers and the methods for people to pay for the service.
That's a great point and a fantastic segue to the questions now that I'll be asking Adam. But you raised some very interesting points there around usage, smartphone penetration, even mobile penetration. What we see in Latin America is 4G just starting, right? So when we talk about streaming or geolocation, e-commerce, the mobile penetration overall is very high, but when we look at smartphone, it's still much lower than in the US for a number of reasons. And you have some markets like Mexico or Brazil that are approaching maybe 30%, which on one hand is a challenge, and on the other hand represents a tremendous opportunity for growth within smartphone. We actually at IMS just in January ran a study with ComScore that shows that Latin American digital users on average are, those who have smartphones are downloading 18 to 20 apps onto their phones, and they're engaging with these apps for about 20 hours a month, which is a very significant percentage of time. It's a very high number at a global level, and so we definitely see, be it for exploration of services or interests or streaming, that content consumption via apps is very strongly on the rise. Now, mobile payments is very interesting. It's something that we were talking about right before we came on stage, Adam. And first, give the audience maybe a sense of what TAP, right? E-commerce, what it's all about, what you do. I'm not sure people maybe fully understand what it is. And then secondly, what are you seeing in terms of growth of e-commerce? What are some of the challenges and opportunities that you're facing in Latin America?
Sure. So TAP Commerce was founded several years ago as kind of a solution to the situation a marketer faces when they have a user who's installed an app, but they don't necessarily know what to do with that user. So studies that we've done have shown that a user installs an app, and 95% of those users actually aren't using the app within 6 months of that install. So the TAP Commerce technology was designed to enable marketers to continue to segment those users after they've installed the app and customize their marketing message to reach those users at the time that's opportune for the marketer. So for example, if I use the Guilt app on my phone to do shopping, I'm waiting for a friend, I'm looking at the Guilt app, I don't buy anything, but later that night, I'm watching TV and playing on my phone. I'm shown an ad for that product. We're all familiar with this from our desktop creepy retargeting for that product. And I click on the ad, it goes back to the app, and I can purchase it. So, very good technology for marketers, good for consumers as well, I think, in that the marketing is more personalized. It's all very it's entirely focused on apps. So Twitter is obviously a very mobile-focused company. About a year ago, they acquired us in order to power the advertising products that they offer for app marketers. So along with the acquisition you can do on Twitter for installs, you can pair it with the TAP Commerce technology to continue to reach those users after they've installed.
Great. And we're seeing that in Latin America, about 60% of mobile users are using e-commerce. Let me take that back. 60% of internet users have purchased something online. And country by country, when it comes to mobile e-commerce, we're seeing some variations in that. So for example, in Mexico, about 50% of those 60% that have purchased something online, right, have purchased something via mobile. In Brazil, which is a tremendous market, that drops to about a third, actually. So about 33% of e-commerce users are purchasing via mobile. And then outside of Mexico and Brazil, that's dropping even further. And perhaps that is in part a consequence of payments and confidence in payments. And as payments continue to grow, as confidence continues to grow, we'll see that emerge as an opportunity. Perhaps because of 4G, right? We know that 4G infrastructure is still coming, still being developed in Latin America. Argentina just got 4G this year, so that's a work in progress. And Adam, what do you see as other challenges when it comes to e-commerce or opportunities for brands to start evolving their mobile e-commerce strategies?
Sure. So, a couple of the challenges, connectivity is a big one, like you've mentioned. No one feels good about engaging with a process where they're giving away money if they're potentially dropping out within the middle of it because their connection got dropped. For TAP Commerce in particular, because we're so focused on apps, I think, like you were saying before, the prevalence of feature phones versus iOS or Android phones is a challenge right now, but we do see a lot of growth in the smartphone activation within the market. We are seeing more users activating their smartphone, downloading apps, and engaging with brands via the app versus mobile web. And to your point and Gus's point about payments, there is kind of like a healthy measure of skepticism about e-commerce in some of the Latin American countries that is starting to dissipate. I think people are getting more comfortable with the act of payment on mobile phones, but it is definitely something that e-commerce brands have to address when they are entering into these markets, is that users are not going to simply enter their credit card information and check out. A lot of them are much more comfortable with the cash on delivery option, which a lot of people in the US probably aren't even familiar with because...
And what is that? What is the cash on delivery option?
Essentially, you enter all of your information, you make no payment, the brand sends a courier with the package, and you actually pay them with money when they come and arrive because many people don't have credit cards, they don't have bank accounts, they don't want to be dispensing that information to someone else, so they're more comfortable with that option. And of course, when you're a retailer engaging this way, there's a lot more opportunity for the user to drop off than when they've just clicked a button and purchased it.
Great. And so, Gus, coming back to this, on this mobile payment concept, Spotify has a freemium model, right? So yes. You can engage, as we all know, right? Listen for free on Spotify via the app, or pay a monthly fee and get an additional service. Now, on the free side, which is a fantastic alternative, given challenges perhaps around mobile payment, obviously that's a way for brands, for advertisers to reach Spotify users. What are you seeing? What are some brand cases that you see in Latin America, and how might some brand cases differ by country? Right? We all know that there's no one size fits all to Latin America. Even besides Brazil speaking Portuguese and the rest of the countries Spanish speaking Latin America, there are cultural nuances that you mentioned, even within Spanish in Peru versus Colombia. How are brands using Spotify to engage Latin American audiences, and how are they tailoring perhaps some of their strategies based on these nuances among these countries?
That's a good question. One of the things that is important to note is that the reason why we have like a free part of our business, it's very good, but it has nothing to do with payments. It's just that the way the service has been established to fight piracy is under the belief that you don't fight piracy with a paid product. You have to fight piracy with something that is free as much as piracy, but with a better product. Eventually, the customers that are on the free product will upgrade to premium. In fact, 80% of our premium users, even in Latin America, so that reflects like global averages, they came from the free tier. So this is just to illustrate how the free tier is important. And we call it free tier, but at the same time you have to pay the right holders. When someone is listening more than 30 million tracks on our free service, and the way we do this is via advertising. It really depends. It depends on the maturity of each market when it comes to digital and when it comes to mobile. One of the things that I see that is very common across all markets is that although we say that there is a lot of buzz when it comes to mobile and smartphones being more affordable, more accessible, and data plans reducing prices, they're still very expensive. The place where they are more expensive on Earth, for sure, Latin America. But when it comes, when we want to see this translated into mobile advertising, we don't yet. So the mobile advertising spending is really, really small yet. It is growing, but it's really a fraction of the digital spend. One of the things that we can see that varies a lot is how the brands use the local content to engage with their target audiences. And I say local content because in Latin America, local content is even more important. Local music is even more important for customers than anywhere else in the world. So we see markets like Chile where they are very, very aggressive. We were just hitting the market with a big campaign where we're going to have more than 30 million cans and bottles of a local brand, beer brand called Escudo. This brand belongs to Heineken, and it's a big promotion where they're going to invest a lot on, excuse me, point of sale communication, advertising. So they're going full throttle. They're not even testing because they believe that this is the future, and they should engage with consumers in a totally different way. in other markets, and we can see this more in Mexico, there is a lot of buzz when it comes to advertising, and Mexico has become the #4 largest market for us with only 2 years. It's #1 is the United States. #2 is the United Kingdom. Then you have Germany, and then you have Mexico. And by the end of the year, I think that we're going to be #3 with Mexico. Having said that, there is more of a testing mentality in Mexico. So brands start testing, seeing that it works, and then they go full throttle, while in some markets like Chile, they go full throttle right away. So we see this difference in the way that they use the platform. But one thing that is really common is that they don't see the need to have like a music strategy to use Spotify. You know, they understand that music is a powerful way to engage with their customers, with their users. So they are really embracing the platform, and we have been having like a big growth across the region.
Great. And Noah, similarly, brands embracing Foursquare in Latin America. What are you seeing in terms of brand activation?
Yeah, I mean, Brazil and Mexico are definitely our fastest growing markets there. I think what we've been seeing is that this notion that the places you go is the best representation of the interest that you have. It's kind of ringing pretty true with advertisers there, and we're seeing a lot of financial services companies, Visa, Amex, MasterCard, some of the biggest, and a lot of kind of like maybe higher priced goods, like I think Jaguar is one of our bigger advertisers as well. And what they're doing is kind of reaching people usually basically at the point where they're in an interesting context. So, if you're checking in at an airport, then you're probably someone who's traveling, and Visa and MasterCard want to reach you, and Amex want to reach you with all their kind of relevant benefits if you want to use their card for traveling. If you're checking in at a gym, obviously, maybe you're into fitness. So thinking about both reaching the type of audience and that person at the right context, something that's really resonating with advertisers. We're just starting to roll out a product which is allowing you to target kind of segments of users based on their real world behavior, but target them off Foursquare. And that's something I think that's going to grow as well, which allows you to reach people, including cross-device targeting. If you want to reach people based on their mobile behavior, but reach them on the web where maybe they're going to be easier to commerce and easier to transact, that's going to be an option as well.
Great.
Great.
And similarly, in a sense, Twitter is a platform in which users are engaging based on interest. I've seen some brand activations with Tap and Twitter with Despegar, which just got a big investment by Expedia, I believe. Is it Expedia? They're like the Expedia of Latin America, right? Large online travel agency. OLX, which is the largest classifieds, right, online. What are you seeing in terms of e-commerce? How are these integrations happening? What kind of verticals are leveraging mobile e-commerce in Latin America?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the advertisers Tap Commerce have in the market right now, travel and kind of retail are definitely the biggest ones. I think they were the ones that understood our technology from their experience on the desktop side and are seeing kind of a very, very rapid migration from desktop to mobile. So they're trying to be mobile first. They're trying to activate these users as soon as they've installed the app. I mean, I think from the data that we look at, if a user's not opening the app within the first 7 days, the majority of them are probably never going to activate. So, they love Tap Commerce. They love that they can, have a turnkey solution where, we plug into their measurement partner or a data source to get the app data. And they can kind of have us start reaching these users as soon as they've installed the app to get them to, whether it's purchase a vacation on Despegar or, post on OLX or buy a new t-shirt on Dafiti. It's just like a very, very effective and cost-efficient way for them to reach these customers.
And I think we have a minute left in our presentation. Any takeaways for businesses looking to enter into Latin America? We'll go this way.
Just kind of going along with the theme that we've said, every market in Latin America is very different. There's no one-size-fits-all approach, so definitely customize your message accordingly. Don't do the same thing in Colombia that you do in Brazil, because chances are it's not going to work.
Great advice. Noah, anything to add?
I would say flip your development strategy from iOS first to Android first. and
Right.
think about devices that we used to use 2 years ago as being the devices that are dominant there. So just in terms of speed and performance, you have slower networks, older devices, less storage space. So if you can make your apps, take up less data, run faster, and take up less storage, you'll perform better. And then Android, I think, interestingly, because it has a lot of interesting stuff around Wi-Fi scanning and background location, if you're building something location services space, we see 10, 15 percentage point boost in accuracy for all the different kind of location fixes we do. So whether you're working kind of in a geo-advertising side or you're building consumer products that use location, like Android actually has a secret benefit, which is that it's much more accurate than using iOS. So.
Right, yeah, Android about 60% of phones down there.
And obviously the dominant platform, yeah.
And Gus, as the resident Latin American of this trio.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that, because I'm based there, and I see that many companies that just think that their global strategy can travel and work in Latin America, they do fail. So that's the number one. If you want to go to Latin America, you have to play local. So have a mix of really talented people from abroad, from other regions, but hire people from Latin America to help them customize and make like these global strategies tailored to the markets. I think this is one that is very important. Second one that I would say is about payments. Don't think that you're going to succeed charging people in US dollars. So many companies are still doing cross-border transactions there, and they don't see like the full potential of the region just because of that, to be honest. And the third point, it's hard. It's really hard. It's complex. The tax environment, the legal environment. So if you want to play in Latin America, there's a lot. You can ask P&G, Unilever, Facebook, Google, and they're going to say, yes, it's worth, go there. But you have to be resilient and persistent and like the sensation of being in a roller coaster. So.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's what we see as one of the services that IMS can provide is overcoming those challenges, because you do need a local footprint, as you said, to operate in Latin America, understanding all these nuances, but really having a local presence is extremely important. Any last thoughts? Good, great. Well, thank you for joining us today, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you.